Welcome to the Equity Teacher Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rachael Mahmood. In this podcast, we'll dive into the stories, the voices, and the expertise of incredible teacher leaders who are making a difference through the equity work they do in their classrooms and their communities.
I am super excited today to welcome our very special guest for episode 6. I actually met Bryn because we're both Illinois Teacher of the Year cohort members. She is the Early Career Educator. No, sorry, I always get that wrong. The Outstanding Early Career Educator for 2024, and also a former student of the school district that I work in. And so that's been crazy. Bryn Zingrebe. Well, we're super excited to have you on, Bryn. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us where you work. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. My name's Bryn. I'm currently teaching at Evergreen Park Community High School in Evergreen Park, Illinois. I teach science right now, which, is what I love. I studied chemistry in college. So right now I'm teaching all levels of chemistry. Previously, I've also taught earth and space science. And as Rachael said, last year I had the honor of being named ISBE's Outstanding Early Career Educator. So that has been really exciting. So thank you for having me.
Yes. And so I have a small obsession with, early career educators, preclinical teachers, student teachers. I absolutely love having preclinical students in my classroom. They think I'm crazy because I'll take 3, 4, 5, 6 preclinical students a year. But I just feel like early career educators, preclinical students, they are a wealth of knowledge. They keep us connected, us old folks. I've been now in education for 20 years. They keep us connected to what's going on in college and to all the new theory. And they come in with so much passion and so much energy. And that is definitely one of the reasons I was super drawn to you. Bryn and I have spent a lot of time together going around the state. She's accompanied me at so many different events, and I've just really had a chance to get to know you. And your passion is contagious. So we need us 20-year-in folks need to spend more time with. How many years have you been teaching now?
This is 5. This is year 5 for me.
Yes, with the year 5 folks, because you keep us feeling young at heart and excited about what we do every day. But tell us a little bit about being an early career educator. I mean, what do you think? Is it all sunshine and roses like it looks like to us?
Well, I think I had a really unique perspective coming into the career when I did. My first year of teaching was in 2020, so at the dead center of COVID. I actually finished my student teaching remotely. So it was one of those things where I came in and kind of had an expectation that I was going to be an outsider because I was new, I was younger. But because we were all just learning to navigate the challenges of the pandemic all at once, I was actually welcomed with open arms. It was kind of one of those things where, it takes a village to raise a child or to teach a student. And my colleagues really accepted me early on. I was somebody who was placed in the forefront of planning and collaboration, and we worked really well together as a team. So I think I had a very unique perspective simply because of when I came into the profession. There obviously are some days that were difficult, and I would go home crying in the car just because I felt like a loser or whatever the case may be. But those
were all struggling through that pandemic years.
To be honest with you, those days have kind of been few and far between simply because of the support system I have and the students that I get to work with. So it's been great.
That's so awesome. Just the unique challenges of early career educators. I mean, they come with all this passion to the classroom. They come with all these great ideas. They come with all this theory that they've learned, lesson plans they designed themselves. They walk into the classrooms and oftentimes it can be a little jarring. I talked to somebody today who is a coordinator for student teachers, and she said it's really sad that some of the student teachers that were being placed with teachers that were telling them run as far away as you can, or when I've worked with student teachers and preclinical teachers when they're super excited to implement stuff, they've been learning about the culturally responsive teaching strategies. They go into these classrooms and, you know, they're working with teachers who are just not interested in trying out some of these new methods or looking at these different theories. I mean, did you face any of those struggles?
Not really, to be honest with you.
That's
The school that I student taught at Elmwood Park Community High School. They were actually very diverse relative to where I grew up. So it was a good experience being exposed to students of different cultural backgrounds than ones that I was exposed to in my early clinical schools in Normal, because I went to school at Illinois State University. My teacher was very welcoming, my cooperating teacher. She was one of those teachers that she's like, whatever we have to do to make kids feel safe and help them learn science, we're going to do it. So very early on, that was something that I was faced with, in the sense of I didn't have anyone tell me to run. She was very passionate about her job. And even the teachers that I get to work with here, they are very passionate about teaching science, working with students. So luckily, I haven't had anybody tell me I have to get lost just yet.
Well, that's great. And I'm glad you didn't, because you are trailblazing your way through your first 5 years. You've definitely accomplished a lot. You know, you and I went to the Project Lead conference together, and the theme was teacher leadership. And those were all preclinical and student teachers at that point, still in their university programs. And the theme was they can also be teacher leaders. Preclinical teachers can be teacher leaders, and early career teachers can be teacher leaders. You don't have to wait till you're 20 years in to be a teacher leader. And if you can be a teacher leader, you can definitely be an equity-focused teacher leader. So, why don't you share some of the ways that you have exercised your leadership opportunities in your school and some of the programs that you got going?
Absolutely. I think a big thing, and just from what I've heard from other early career educators as well, that's difficult going into a school is figuring out kind of where you belong, where your skill set can be best utilized, figuring out what extracurricular activities you can assist with, because everybody kind of has their role when you come in. Something I knew very early on in my teaching career was that I wanted to continue my education. I didn't know at the time exactly how I wanted to continue my education, but I knew that was important to me. So I started seeking out from my colleagues, from my administrators, places that we were lacking as a staff, like what were skills that needed to be more developed. I noticed a large discrepancy in the teachers in the language that they speak versus our students in the languages that they speak at home, in school, and throughout their day. So something I was really passionate about early on was getting an ESL endorsement. That was kind of my first step in teacher leadership at my school. I had posed the idea to my evaluator at the time, and he told me, like, hey, this is great. This is something we really want to get other people involved in. We're willing to make it happen if you can get some teachers on board with you. So early on, just as I was learning to meet people, finally outside of my classroom, being able to be face-to-face with people.
Yes.
For once, not in a Zoom meeting, I would, hey, please do this with me. I would love to be able to do this together. I would love to be able to collaborate and figure out how we're going to best serve students who aren't fluent in English. So that's kind of how it all started.
So what did you do to help bridge that then? Did you start some kind of program or?
So essentially what happened was when we brought it to the attention of the administration, they partnered with University of St. Francis to actually build a cohort for the teachers. So all of the teachers that we had recruited, that we had brought together, we were all attending endorsement classes together online. And that was great because we were able to work on assignments together, work on interventions together, and then ultimately implement them in the classroom. These were then things that we were able to share with other staff members during PLC meetings, staff meetings, to get a broader implementation across the school building. So that's kind of how it was all organized at the time.
Oh my gosh, I love that. It's like you identified a need in the community of students, you sought out resources, you got a whole group of teachers together to be able to do this endorsement together and then share out your learning with your community. And just how special that is. When you think about an ELL endorsement, we think about, language teachers. We don't really think about the math and sciences teachers, but chemistry, what I remember from my year of chemistry in high school, like Mole Island, that's it. But I know there was a lot of math, and I know that there was a lot of vocabulary, and there's a lot of like elements, right? Isn't that chemistry? Elements that people right? And those are big words. Some of those elements are really big words. And so I could see the struggle of being an English language learner and having to learn all these tier 3 vocabulary words. And then on top of it, just the bias of chemistry. People are just scared. They're just like, oh no, chemistry, that's not my thing. I don't think people think about how culturally responsive teaching can happen in a science classroom. When we think about culturally responsive teaching, we're often thinking about, oh, let's bring in a book to validate this student's identity. And that's great. That's what we teach. But I'm assuming that you brought in some different instructional strategies, like how we meet the needs of culturally diverse students with how we teach. So tell us a little bit about how you made it accessible for your students from all these different cultural backgrounds, especially your ELL students.
Well, luckily early on when I was in my student teaching experience, I was on a block schedule that was 90 minutes long. I with those students who were also EL learners, that it was really difficult for them to sit through lengthy notes, lengthy lectures. So something I tried implementing very early on was short and concise notes that are very focused on keywords and key vocabulary. Ultimately, words that maybe they come into contact with outside of a chemistry classroom, but have a different meaning in my classroom than they would just in their general talk.
An example of one of those words.
The word negative in chemistry actually means more electrons than less. And so they learn that the word negative their whole life means that you have less of something. But in chemistry, it's the complete opposite. It means you have more electrons. So that's something where we focus on those key terms, key vocabulary, and I try to make notes in direct instruction no longer than 5 to 10 minute chunks at a time. I try to break that up to give them the opportunity to collaborate with others, work on an assignment, practice the vocabulary or concepts that we've discussed, just so, first of all, it's more digestible for them, but also so they can learn from their peers. I think sometimes when a teacher gives direct instruction, but doesn't give them the opportunity to digest what they just heard and discuss it with their peers and the people that they're sitting with that are like-minded to them, it makes it very difficult to kind of organize all these new ideas in their head.
And that's what, because oftentimes students from marginalized groups come from collective cultures, and students from collective cultures like to learn in community with each other. And if it's all direct instruction, if it's all listening based, students that enjoy learning in community, their default is to learn in community. They often are also from oral cultures, and their default is to learn through, the orality of the language. They can get lost in these direct instruction classrooms. So I was that kid. I need to verbally process every about 5 minutes. I probably would have remembered a ton more if I was in your chemistry class than, not to knock my chemistry teachers back in 1990 or something, but, I think that helps, that verbal processing, that oral processing, that helps students from oral cultures, and that collaboration, students from communal cultures getting the opportunity to work with each other. Any more strategies that you can share with us to help?
Absolutely. I'll talk a little bit about the manipulatives that I use in my class, but before I do, I think too, for the teachers out there, one thing that we forget sometimes is the value of listening to our students for formative feedback. I think sometimes teachers think that their time is best spent just giving the direct instruction, but I think there's a lot of power in allowing students to talk about the content in your class, listening, and then responding to their thinking. My students at least, are very receptive to talking and having me address them separately. Like, hey, I heard that you just said this. Like, what did you mean by that? And trying to push them in the direction that I want them to be in with their thinking. So I think that that's extremely helpful. As I mentioned previously, manipulatives are extremely important in my class. I have a lot of students that have just very limited attention spans, need to move, need to hold something, need to just move objects around. So I found that when we're talking about particles, which is something that's very abstract for a lot of learners, if I can make something physical for them to move and manipulate and adjust to help them visualize something that we can't see, that's been extremely helpful to them. So one of the common things that I've used in my class is I use just pony beads, just simple beads. I know some teachers use coins or other objects for students to move around. We pretend that they're particles, and we use those bead particles to illustrate what's going on at the particle level, even though we can't see it. So that's been really helpful.
That's amazing. And let's be honest, even in our professional developments, when we go as teachers and they pull out the manipulatives, we get excited too. I mean, even if you get excited, we also need to fidget. We're also from all different cultures and backgrounds, teachers. We also have all different learning styles as well. And it's crazy because I feel like, as students get older and we're moving away from more concrete models, we're like to those abstract thinking, we lose a lot of those opportunities to make it concrete for them. And the sad thing is that's probably why those skills don't gel in the same ways that our basic skills gel, because we use so many learning modalities when they're younger, and then they kind of just slowly start to dissipate as they get older, and we rely more on just mental processes. And so taking that tangible away or giving that tangible back in high school, I'm sure it has great benefits for your students. Have you seen some amazing benefits with your students?
Oh, absolutely. I think probably the biggest benefit I've seen with the manipulatives overall is with my students' communication skills. We always talk about soft skills that aren't necessarily directly related to our content, but we're still trying to teach them through school. Communication is huge in chemistry. It's key to their success in the laboratory. And those manipulatives really help them just collect their ideas, organize their ideas, and help to show other students their thinking. Sometimes students can't come up with the words either because they don't know them or whatever the case may be to express their thinking in a science class. But with the addition of the manipulatives, they can show students like, hey, this is how I worked through the problem. This was my thinking. And it kind of helps them explain their vision or their view to people who can't see inside their brain, which has been great. The one thing I will say that I'm most excited about is when students teach others through the use of manipulatives, like, hey, let me walk you through this problem, like teacher. That to me is the most powerful and exciting, watching them build their confidence with the content to the point where they feel like they can teach someone else. So that's always been really great.
And that's also great with students from communal cultures because it's very much about helping culture, right? Helping each other and coaching, and that reciprocal teaching is so powerful. They get to use all those skills as well. That's so great. Anything else? Any other strategies up your sleeve that you're willing to share with us? I just want to make sure we got them all.
Well, as I say, just the big thing is allowing them to collaborate freely. I think that's just extremely important to allow them to try to communicate scientific ideas in their own words. I think sometimes when we're in school, we're really pushing academic vocabulary, like using the correct words in the correct way every single time. But there's a lot of power too in allowing students to use analogies or just their traditional language, their day-to-day language to explain scientific concepts. So that's something I also really push for as well. I know we've been talking about different manipulatives and how I call them particles. That's just a more friendly word for saying molecules, atoms, or things that are more scary. They all mean the same thing, but students can picture particles in their head. So that's why I like to use words that are more familiar with them.
I like that too. And when they're using vocabulary that's familiar to their culture, to their background knowledge, it's going to be sticky. They're going to remember it a lot longer. So they have something to lob it onto. And that schematic connection is so incredibly important, especially when you're introducing so much new content on a regular basis. Just really great strategies. Do you have any great student success stories you want to share with us? Everyone likes to hear a great student story.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing about chemistry that I feel like makes it challenging from a teaching perspective is there is a computational or a mathematical aspect to their skills. and what we apply in class. And I have students from all different proficiencies of math. Some students who are in accelerated math, some students who really even struggle with just basic multiplication. With that being said, it's one of those things where it can get really frustrating because these students kind of compartmentalize their learning. They don't realize that they're applying math skills in science. Right. They think that they're just bad at science. But really, it's just because we haven't mastered the skills in another class that are going to help prepare you for some of the skills that you're learning in my class. So like I said, seeing the teaching of other students is always super exciting, especially when someone starts off with really low confidence on a topic or a skill that we're working on. And all of a sudden they have this aha moment and then they feel comfortable teaching someone else. That's always wonderful to see. Something that I say in my classroom that feels like a success, because I hear other students saying it now more and more, is because I have high schoolers, they really care about what other people think of them. So if they make a mistake, they're always like, oh, that was so stupid. I'm so stupid. Mm-hmm. And so something I always say in response is, you're not stupid, you're just still learning. And that's something where like when they start picking on one another, giving each other a hard time, it's always really sweet to hear them say like, no, I'm not stupid. I'm just still learning. And I've heard it outside my classroom in the hallway with students not even realizing that I hear it. And it feels really special to know that they're building confidence in a subject that is traditionally more difficult.
Yeah. And I tell my students that stuff all the time. I'm like, everything is hard before it's easy. Everything is heavy before it's light, right? Everything has a struggle before it's struggle free. And that struggle, the going from the struggle to like the accomplishment, that's the learning process, right? If it was easy from the beginning, you didn't actually learn it, right? If there's no struggle, there's no challenge, it's not like an accomplishment. And so I think that when we tell students ahead of time, like this is supposed to be hard. Everyone is supposed to feel that this is hard. This is going to be hard. And then little by little, it's going to get easier. And that's called learning. And we got to lift the heavy weights to make the big muscles. I always do that with my students. I'll like pretend I'm pumping iron with like a pencil. And I'll be like, if I lift this pencil 50 times, will my bicep be bulging? And the kids are like, no. And I'm like, why? And they're like, it's too light. Same thing with learning. If we just keep doing the easy stuff over and over again, our brains will not grow. Our brain biceps will not be bulging. And that's why I get my students to do hard math. You know,
yeah.
I use the same language in the 5th grade classroom. So I like to end on this idea. If you could create a student success playlist, a song, a quote, or story that helps inspire you to keep on teaching, because we definitely want you to keep on teaching. You still got like another 30 years to go in this career. What would be on that?
There's a quote that I received from a student one time that I think about often, especially on days that I felt like I didn't do my best as a teacher. I think every teacher wants the kids to like them. Every teacher wants to hear the I miss you when your students move on to another class. But I think a statement that's become more meaningful to me over the last 5 years is when students come back and tell me that they miss my class. Because not only does that mean that I touched them in some way, but I created an environment for them where they could feel accepted, where they could feel like they could achieve something or face a challenge and be successful. That's what I like to hear when students come back and they tell me like, I miss this class. I miss being in this class. So that for me is what keeps me going every single day, along with obviously my student scrapbook of all their lovely little notes and drawings they make me. Yeah. Couldn't part with those. Like I always tell them, I'm like, if the school was on fire, I'm not running to get my cell phone. I'm running to get your notes because the cell phone can be replaced. Yeah. Lovely little notes that you leave me on days that like I'm not doing well, they're priceless to me. So if there was a playlist or things that I had to say that keep me going, it's definitely those two sentiments for sure.
Have you read the book, like Fill Your Bucket or How to Fill Your Bucket?
Yeah.
All about the nice things. So like I actually got like a small bucket from the dollar store, and I would put all the nice notes into the bucket. And so kids used to love to leave me stuff because it'd be part of my bucket. And this bucket just went from like year to year to year on my desk. And and so whenever I want to quit my job, I pull my bucket out and I'm like, all right, let's check out, these notes. They definitely keep you going. So thank you so much for sharing your strategies. Just so incredibly honored to know you, to be working alongside you this year in our 2024 Illinois Teacher of the Year cohort. You're doing amazing things. You are lifting up your community, your students, and you are 100% an equity teacher leader, because you don't need a fancy title or a fancy position to be an equity teacher leader. You simply are, by the way you view your students, so much love and heart, the practices that you implement in your classroom that lift up their achievement and their success and their confidence in themselves. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Bryn.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. This was lovely.
Put the work in, yeah, I earned it. It's my destiny.